Good afternoon, everyone. This is Megan with Aperture Education. We're coming live to you via our new webinar with Gloucester County Public Schools in Virginia. We're so glad to have you here today. I just wanted to come on and make a few announcements before we allow our panelists to begin speaking. The first of which is, if at any point you have to jump off of this webinar, or if you weren't able to join us today live, we will be recording the webinar, so you will have a copy of it in your inbox, most likely tomorrow morning. If for some reason you cannot see the slides in our presentation today, you may see that they're in a small box at the top of your screen. If you double click that small box at the top of your screen, you should be able to bring those slides down into the larger portion of your screen. Again, you'll see a slide right now that says the whole child, supporting early elementary social emotional growth using DESSA data within an MTSS system. So if you're not seeing that right now, or if you're having any technical difficulties, there is a little button that says raise your hand, and that button will allow you to raise your hand, and I will be able to see that. And then I will send you a private chat so that we can figure out what's going on with these technology issues that you might be having. Let's see, what else? There's a couple of other things that I want to point you to. At the very bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat feature. If you click on that chat box, why don't you go ahead and see if you can type your name in there along with maybe your job title and where you're joining us from today, just so we can test out the chat feature so you can see what it looks like. And that allows you to chat not only with the other people who are participating, but also with the panelists as well. So let's go ahead. I'll give you a few seconds to test that out and see if it works for you. Excellent. Great. And then there is also another button at the bottom of your screen. It says Q&A, and that is where you can place any questions that you have for our panelists. We're going to try to leave about 15 to 10 minutes at the end of the presentation to answer any questions that you might have for the panelists. Instead of interrupting during the presentation, we always find that it might be a little bit better to just wait and answer those questions at the end. So again, you can type any questions that you have into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Also, just as a reminder, once again, I said the recording will be going out in an email. Also, with that email that's going out tomorrow morning, you'll be receiving some additional resources, some from Aperture Education and then some from Gloucester County. These are just kind of supplemental resources that we will talk about a little bit during the presentation today, and things that you might find useful with regards to MTSS and SEL. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to our representatives from Gloucester County, and we can go ahead and begin.
All right, well, good afternoon. This is Megan from Gloucester County. And to start us off today, we wanted you to go ahead and go to Mentimeter.com, and we have just a few questions for you all. When you get to Mentimeter.com, go ahead and enter this code, 304958, and you don't need to put in any spaces. So the first question that we have for you is, what is your professional title? So you can go ahead and type in any responses to that. You can put in up to 2 responses for your professional title. Hopefully you all are there. Many of you have more than one role, so that's why we wanted to give you a couple options here. And if you're not familiar with Mentimeter, when this is kind of like a Wordle and Word doc, the larger the print, that means the more people who have typed that in. So as you can see, we have a few school social workers, school psychologists, we have a school psych intern, and director of counseling, coordinator of special ed. We have a couple school counselors or counselors here today. School psychologists are winning now.
We're not biased at all.
Okay, so the next question for you all is, on a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being the most important, how important do you think it is to teach social emotional learning in the elementary grades?
We're probably all a little bit biased on this one.
Probably so. Okay, I think we probably know how important we feel like it is. And then finally, what do you see as the biggest barrier to implementing SEL in your division or in your role? These can be short answer, they can be one word up to a few words, and you can put in up to 2 answers for each person. And again, I think it's interesting, you know, the typical barriers that I think most people see are time, resources, that being staff, as well as funding. So, fixed mindset, that's interesting, yeah. So at the end of this presentation, these slides aren't in the presentation right now, but we'll put them in at the end. And if you want to keep on answering any of these questions, feel free. Did you go back? Mm-hmm. Okay. So by way of introductions for us.
So I am Sarah Summers. I am a school psychologist. This is my 3rd year in Gloucester County, and I serve at an elementary school and a middle school.
I'm Carly Hanchak. I'm a school counselor at one of our elementary schools, and this is my 4th year in Gloucester County.
And I'm Megan Connolly-Grothaus. I'm also a school psychologist, and this year I serve 2 elementary schools. So today, you hopefully saw our outline and what we had indicated we wanted to get through today. The first part is the foundation. Why? This is our why. Why did we feel we needed to do SEL and use DESSA? And these foundational building blocks allowed us to eventually get buy-in from all of our stakeholders. So I pulled this quote, it's been attributed to Aristotle, that educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. And this is a fundamental reason to focus on SEL. Imagine if every middle school conversation or embarrassing moment you ever had was seconds away from being publicized all over social media, across the entire grade or school. That's the environment our kids are living in right now, and we felt that it was essential that we support them. So some of the foundational blocks that we use to help convince our school board, as well as our superintendent and our division, are listed on these next 2 slides. First of all, across the nation, but certainly in Virginia, we have disproportionality in discipline. Our most recent superintendent's bulletin in February of 2020 said that in Virginia, Black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended than other students. Virginia's profile of a graduate. So Virginia is not Common Core. We use what we call our standards of learning. And in 2016, the General Assembly proposed that the profile of a Virginia graduate be adjusted to have the 5 C's. So what they They are our critical thinking, creative thinking, collaboration, communication, and citizenship. And they said these are skills that students need to be successful and to be profitable in their future. So as you can tell with those 5 C's, 3 of them are about communication, collaboration, citizenship, focusing on those social emotional skills needed. In our county, also in Gloucester, several years ago, we saw an increase in the number of students who attempted suicide or died by suicide. And this was a very concerning situation in our division. Our school sites highlighted the need for some implementation of supports as well as education. And in Gloucester County, not just the schools, but in the most recent statistics from 2017, Gloucester County was the 5th highest in the state for the rate of suicide. When we looked at DESSA and their resiliency or an optimistic thinking components of SEL, we felt that that might address these needs. If you haven't seen Virginia's new code of conduct, you might want to look it up. And again, all these references where all this information has come from is on the very last slide for you all, so you can find the sources. The new code of conduct is titled Positive and Preventative Code of Student Conduct and Alternatives to Suspension. So we no longer have the D codes coming July 2020. It's supposed to be implemented fully. There's no longer the defiance, disrespect, disruption, but it's looking at equity through leveled responses to student behavior. So for every behavior, which they're called SBAR codes, student behavior / administrator response code, there's an educational piece, a restorative practice, and some direct intervention that needs to be put in place for each of these behaviors. This is huge in our state and aligns completely with VTSS or the tiered system of supports. There's an entire section in this guidance document on preventative and positive approaches to discipline. And those are all aligned with the, like I said, the VTSS system as well as SEL. And then ESSA, of course, is also the nation's main education law for all public schools. And the National Education Association looked at ESSA and said, even though it doesn't mention, quote, learning mindsets or skills, the law replaced the references to core academic subjects and replaced it with well-rounded education for all students. So aligning with ESSA and accountability, Virginia instituted the Virginia Kindergarten Readiness Program, and that too was just fully implemented this year. And this is a way of assessing our kindergartners to assess readiness in the areas of literacy, math, and SEL. And the SEL that they assess, if you have seen it this year in your kindergartens, were social skills and self-regulation assessments. So they're looking at those skills in order to help kids control their emotions and behaviors, as well as the skills they need to navigate relationships within the school setting. Our governor has also focused very strongly on early childhood education. July of 2019, he said he wanted to expand access to all early childhood education for any 3-year-old and 4-year-olds. And his summary of that, he said, I want to make sure that public funds support high quality programs, and addressing early childhood education would greatly assist in developing a more robust Virginia workforce. And finally, hot off the press, House Bill 753 just was passed into law last week. February 24th, the Senate passed the law that there will be guidance standards for social emotional learning in Virginia, SOL. So in terms of getting our stakeholders, as you'll hear throughout our presentation, it was key for us to align with our stakeholders, and that means a lot of conversations with a lot of people over a lot of years. And so one of our assistant principals kind of summarized it like this. It's key to have that relationship with your administrators, and it's those just compelling conversations that you will continue to have in order to get the buy-in. Because Virginia is likes to be different. We don't use MTSS, a multi-tiered system of supports, but rather we're called Virginia Tiered System of Supports. And the definition is of VTSS includes that it's a framework and a philosophy that provide resources and support to help every student be successful in academics and behavior. So that's why I like to use this graphic here, the triangle, where you see that the problem-solving model is embedded in all three tiers, that we need to be using evidence-based system-wide practices to provide responses to academic and behavior needs. And it begins with systemic change. So you have to be working not only at the division level, but at the school level and at the classroom level. In Virginia, in Gloucester, we started way back in 2008 with some of our VTSS implementation. And we felt strongly that it always applied to both academics and behavior. Like your ratings on the Mentimeter indicated, the need for SEL, being a 10 pretty much across the board, that is also supported in research. So in 2017, the Center for American Progress indicated that basically 250 preschoolers are suspended or expelled every day. It came from a study from Yale, and it showed that preschoolers were expelled at rates 3 times higher than their school-aged peers. And subsequent research also showed that the disproportionality. Although African American children represented 18% of public preschool enrollment, they represented 48% of preschoolers receiving multiple out-of-school suspensions. The report kind of summarized at the end saying, increasingly social and emotional learning is understood as a major factor in educational success. So those were our whys.
The next part we'll go into is how we actually started implementing DESSA, the Devereux Student Strength Assessment in Gloucester, how we came to it, and the first few years. So we won't go into great depth in this area as we wanted to focus more on application, but it may give you some ideas or some tips or see a glimpse into our county. So like Megan was saying, Gloucester County has believed in and supported the idea that we need to support behavior, academics, and the whole child for a long time, but it's been a constantly developing journey. So you'll see in 2008, one of our elementary schools was the first to join the state RTI cohort, and then from there it kind of spirals down into more and more schools jumping on ship and believing in the VTSS framework. So about a couple years after that, in 2011, 2012, we officially joined what at that point in time was called the Effective School-Wide Discipline Cohort, which was very similar to PBIS. A few years later, 2 of our middle schools formally joined what was now called the PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports Cohort. And then just within it's almost our second year now, we as a whole division applied to be in the VTSS cohort. There have been a lot of changes, a lot of additional tools, additional support, and research is constantly changing and showing us how to best support students. So we were excited that we were accepted into the cohort and that we've gotten additional resources, additional support from the state, and some ideas about how we can further our division. So previously you see in all those kind of breakdowns, it's either more focused on academics or behavior, but currently the VTSS, Virginia Tiered Systems of Support, really focuses on the whole child, academics, behavior, as well as when you go to those trainings, they'll talk about social emotional competencies and growth. So in Gloucester, we realized someone said that there's too many students. There's so many students. You're absolutely right. So we wanted to say, where could we make the most change and how could we help students the most? So although we support all of our students, we decided to put a significant focus on intervention for students kindergarten through 2nd grade. So we came to this decision through our VTSS system within the county, as well as getting feedback from school counselors, from reading specialists, from math specialists, and really it was a whole county buy-in to support those students. But you'll also hear us talk about, even though we're focusing on younger students today, it's really exciting to see how our middle school and even our high school are embracing this and trying to explicitly teach students social emotional competencies. So Megan's going to get ready and discuss the years of background work that went into establish that we wanted the DESSA we wanted to work with Aperture, and how we were able to get the support to get the time and to get the money and to get the buy-in for social emotional learning.
So as my little graphic there says, keep calm and try again. So if at first you don't succeed, try again. It took us over 3 years really to get this off the ground. And like I said before, it was a lot of conversations. We established a behavior subcommittee that met for over a year. And we did a lot of research on different universal screeners, because again, going back to that VTSS model, we felt it was important to get some, to be evidence-based, to have some data that helped us screen for students in need, as well as to look at the progress and the outcomes of intervention. So we looked a lot into DESSA, and DESSA was very strong in terms of its research. The normative data is also just extremely strong, as well as the reliability and validity of the assessment. And that, I don't know, I didn't see that as a barrier, but that was one of the barriers that we reached, was teachers saying, I don't feel capable or competent to rate these students. And, you know, I don't know that my rating is as good as anybody else's. And we can continue to say their normative data, they were normed on teachers just like you and students, and their normative and reliability and validity statistics are very strong. We were also it was very important that was aligned with CASEL. So there was strong research with the CASEL standards, and that was key for us. With DESSA also, the resources being included was also a big plus for us, because one of our key barriers, again, was what are we going to do if we identify these kids? We heard from several people, counselors, parents, teachers, even some of the central office personnel saying, you know, well, what do we do? Aren't we liable if we identify these students as having needs? Are we more liable if, you know, something goes wrong? And our director of student services continued to tell us that, you know, you have a lot more, you're in much stronger ground if you do something rather than doing nothing. And so deciding that we were going to screen for strengths and needs with the DESSA, as well as then use that data to support these students, really took a while to get that buy-in from all of the different people that needed to be implementing this. Like I said, we also, with DESSA, it was key that it was focused on the strengths and needs. So again, in conversations with teachers who are a bit uncomfortable about rating, we continue to let them know you're not diagnosing depression, you're not diagnosing mental health, you're looking at observable behaviors and helping these students be able to be successful in the school setting. The teaching strategies were key. We indicated that it was easy administration, and then also that the resources, there's tiered resources available. Our assistant superintendent eventually also became very supportive of this process, so that was key. And then looking for funding support was certainly a concern. And so, as Sarah mentioned, with the VTSS grant funds, we were able to push forward a little bit. But Aperture Ed actually has a webinar tomorrow on, it's called Get Creative with Social Emotional Learning Funding. And they have lots of resources on their website as well in terms of helping you find that funding. For us, we used a gradual implementation. So over the last 2 years, last year we just kind of said, oh, let's pilot it at the elementary school. So we only used the screener twice last year. We progress monitored, I think, in one school, like one intervention. And then we used the full DESSA for those students who flagged as in need. But this year, we have been much more systematic and have supported our schools in implementing the DESSA completely throughout the year.
So the implementation process really has been easy, and I can speak to that as the counselor at an elementary school. It has been very easy. The resources have been very helpful to implement in classroom lessons and in the general classroom as well, not just my lessons. So next I want to talk about what that process looks like at a school level so we can talk about the application and what we do. So as you see here, this is kind of our guide. We start at the first step. You know, all of our students are screened with the DESSA Mini, and that's from our students' homeroom teachers. So some of our friends rotate classrooms, so we chose to have their homeroom teachers complete their screening. After that, the full DESSA is completed on the students who fall within the in needs range. And those are the students that we're going to look at that maybe need some tier 2 strategies, or perhaps we see that there are quite a few friends that fell in the in needs range in the classroom, and then we can look at changing up some tier 1 strategies. So after the full DESSA is completed and we have our students in need, we are going to talk about these students at data meetings. And our school holds data meetings or grade level meetings twice per month. These meetings include all of the teachers within the grade level, our administrators, myself, our school psychologists, any specialists or interventionists, so that we can really talk about the nitty-gritty of students' academic, behavioral, and emotional support. So in these meetings, we are discussing DESSA data as a whole school, so the teachers can see how the school as a whole has grown or areas of need. And then we break down to the grade level and even the classroom. And this, again, is where we might look at some tier 1 supports that need to be changed. Maybe it's classroom lessons, class meetings, and then some tier 2 supports that I might be able to provide for small group, maybe some check-in, check-out for students, again, at the tier 2 level. We might, in more depth, talk about tier 2 support and individual students in our TDIS or VTSS committee meetings. So after these supports have been implemented for 6 to 8 weeks, just like we would for academics, we might do an additional screener. So we could have a full DESSA completed on the students who were in the in needs range or who have had these supports. We might pull additional data such as attendance, office discipline referrals, et cetera. And that's when we can move forward with a staffing. So we hold staffings not just for academics, but for behavior as well, and their social emotional needs. And that will help us determine tier 3 interventions and supports that need to be put in place. So with all of the data that we've pulled, and especially when we get to those staffings, I track kindergarten through 5th grade screeners. So I have a record of all of the DESSAs that have been done on all of the students in our school, kindergarten through 5th grade. So last year's 2 screenings and our 2 screenings this year, so that I can see how a student's needs and how a grade level needs have changed, and so that I can make sure that our school is implementing the correct support.
So we wanted to give you all some ideas, and these are certainly not exhaustive, but things you might see us doing in Gloucester. We're constantly learning from others, adding new things. Whenever someone goes to a conference, we come back and we try to implement as many evidence-based, research-based strategies as we can within the school. And like Megan was saying, with the new student code of conduct, this is something that I think is going to become even more important for everyone in Virginia to focus on. And certainly I think nationally the trend is to be more restorative and more about teaching rather than just punishing. So when we look at tier 2 approaches, and I don't know if you have a chance to look, the folks from Aperture put up a great resource for you all that separates into the 3 tiers and how you can support students using DESSA at the 3. But the first thing we do in Gloucester is at those tier 2 meetings, our data meetings, our grade level meetings, is we just review all of that data we talked about. So we sometimes focus more so on academics or more so on behavior based on the most recent data, but we can really quickly pull up whether it's office referrals through, we use SWIFT in our county, or if it's pulling up attendance and then looking at the breakdown of attendance, the different competencies of DESSA, as well as a lot of really good academic information. So based on the collection of data from DESSA, we put Tier 2 supports in place, and we decide that as a team. It's not one person responsible for it all or one person that is expected to do everything. So we listed some of the ones we really like to use with our younger students. We'll have the disclaimer for this as well as for Tier 3 approaches. Things like check-in, check-out can be very powerful and can really affect change, but they have to be done with fidelity based on the program you're using, the guidelines you're using. So I've been fortunate. I work at the same school Carly does for elementary, Ms. Sanchek, and she does a phenomenal job using data to drive those check-in, check-outs. She matches students with teachers or support staff that she thinks and the others think will be a good person, a good fit. She's very careful about having a limited number of goals that the student can meet and then build up on those goals, as well as targeting the main areas we're trying to affect change in. So when it's done correctly, I've seen it be very powerful, and it's certainly not the end-all be-all for every student. It will affect change in a lot, but we need to pull other tools from our toolkit. We also use buddy programs, and kind of the cool thing with DESSA is you see student strengths and needs, so you can very easily pull a student that's strong in something but might need help in another area. So if you're strong with social awareness but struggle with personal responsibility, we might be able to go in and find your perfect buddy for you. We also use small group counseling, and we're able to target certain areas or use a more universal social emotional approach. We use sensory breaks, and then one of the things we really like to promote is 2x10 relationship builders, where kids get to talk with their teacher or an adult for 2 minutes straight for 10 days about whatever they want to talk about, which can actually be pretty challenging when it's going to be, Star Wars for 2 minutes straight, and you may not know anything about Star Wars, but it's a great way to learn about the kids in our classroom. Then Tier 3 approaches, I feel like from a personal standpoint, this is the area that we're growing in, and that I always am looking for more support in and looking for new ideas. But following the previously stated VTSS or MTSS process, so we meet as a staffing team to provide additional supports to the student. So our staffing team may depend on what the concerns are. If there are more academic concerns, we'll likely have some of our Title I reading or math specialists there. If it's more behavioral, then I try to always go to them, but I'll definitely be there, as well as our school counselor. We have admin support. We have teachers from multiple grade levels. So it's really a holistic approach to looking at how we can promote growth in students. Then we have several options. The first one that I'll say is unique that I know of is full service school. So full service school is a really cool way. There are a limited number of spaces for students, but it's for any student that needs counseling support within the school setting. And then on top of providing students with counseling once a week, they also, the providers of that program, meet with a team once a month, and that team comprises of community members. So if the student's in a sport, if the student's part of a church or a synagogue, or if a student, loves a certain activity, those community members are invited. The parents always take place. School members are there. And it's just a really great problem-solving process for providing supports for students across all areas. Similar to other counties, we have therapeutic day treatment for students with more externalizing behaviors or who are struggling more on the behavioral side. Similar to before where I was saying, done with fidelity, behavior intervention plans can provide a lot of support and resources and direct teaching. So one of the things I know many of our school counselors try to do with students is to provide very explicit and direct intensive counseling to students in specific social emotional areas, which is where that very focused data from the comprehensive DESSA will come from. Then the final area, Tier 1, universal supports, is the area as a county we are really pushing. This is where every student is going to receive these supports, and we can affect a lot of change. So these are things that are going to be really a global level of social emotional competencies. There are things and strategies we could be doing in the classroom, counseling lessons as a whole school. So in our county, every school approaches social emotional learning a little bit different, but we're all founded in that we use the DESSA to collect our data. We pull strategies from DESSA, and every school is expected to use evidence-based process approaches. And those come from, when you look at What Works Clearinghouse, CASEL has an excellent program guide for CASEL Select programs, as well as not only if they're a select program, but also if they've been shown to have positive effects, as well as the American School Counselor Association. So one thing we found is that this is a truly collaborative approach. It's not just us expecting school counselors to do it. It's not just expecting teachers to do it. It's everyone in the system buying into the fact that we need to make time for this, and we need to support every staff member in the building. Then just a reminder again, even though we're focusing more on kindergarten through second grade, one of the areas we're growing in Gloucester is that our secondary schools are really growing. So we added in DESSA at one of our middle schools. Next year, the other middle school is clamoring to join in as well. And we've developed advisory blocks at several of the schools where they're trying to teach more of those social emotional competencies, as well as that profile of a graduate. So teaching students how to have good citizenship and how to be prepared to enter the workforce or college or a career program.
So one of my schools is Botetourt Elementary School. And looking at Tier 1 at core, after last year doing the DESSA a couple times and looking at our data, Botetourt staff decided they wanted to implement at core the Mind Up curriculum. So we created a couple of subcommittees at this building level to look at the curriculum, comb through it a little bit, and prepare for the school-wide implementation, having kind of a strategic way of implementing and a way to help our teachers implement it easily. So if you've ever looked at the Mind Up curriculum, you know that it starts off with the brain, knowledge of the brain. And the research has shown that children are really fascinated by that, even young children. They're interested and fascinated by the brain. And so one of our kindergartners was so excited about learning about the brain. We have a little video of her talking about her understanding of the hippocampus.
Hippopotamus, what's that part? It's a part of your brain. Without it, that you would never ever remember anything. Not even your favorite ice cream. You wouldn't remember who your best friend is, and you won't remember who your mom and dad are.
Who taught you that?
And I was learning that in school. In school.
So we might not get the vocabulary exactly correct, but a hippopotamus, hippocampus, you know, they're pretty much the same thing. At Botetourt, then, our school counselors have used their data to develop their groups. Again, as Carly said, like Tier 2 interventions predominantly. And just this semester, we're looking at using progress monitoring to determine the outcomes of those small groups.
So I can speak for Achilles Elementary School, being the counselor there. We have a social emotional learning library of books to use, and these might talk about some character education. These might talk about some specific skills, and teachers and families can pull from this library, so that increases our family school partnership as well, providing parents and guardians with resources that they can use to reinforce social emotional learning at home. We use classroom meetings as a way to teach social emotional learning. So for example, we have one fabulous grade level that utilizes classroom meetings in a really unique way. Each day is themed. So for example, they have Work Wednesday, where students are able to bring up concerns and problem solve together. They have Thankful Thursday, where they can work on some gratitude and build relationship between the students, thanking each other for different things. And finally, Fun Friday, because you need to have a little fun, and they get to play some games, which still work on their social emotional skills, because they're working on those interpersonal skills. And we utilize movement breaks. And as you can see in the video that's showing, we have a really great sensory pathway that was created by one of our staff members. And this just is another avenue where students can take a break and be ready to rejoin their classroom when they need it.
So another piece we really wanted to focus on, and we could talk a lot longer, we wanted to choose kind of our favorite things that are happening right now, but certainly all of our schools are invested. We just highlighted the two that we work at as school psychologists and a school counselor. But one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing this year at Achilles, which Carly and I work at, we're able to collaborate a lot, and we have those school data meetings. And one of the things we noticed starting last year and really leading into this year is that there was significant need in kindergarten and first grade. So similar to how you heard Megan stating those statistics about suspensions, expulsions. No one wants to do that. We love all of the kids at our schools, but there are definitely more behaviors now than I've ever heard of. I'm constantly hearing adults say that there are more needs now, and that how can we support our kids? So one of the things we did as a school was trying to add in more resources and more strategies for those students. So Carly was able to implement, she focuses with first grade and kindergarten and does guidance classroom school counseling lessons 2 times a month, as well as focused small groups for social emotional learning. Then we've actually, her and I have been able to collaborate this year using to focus on social emotional needs in first graders. So we've been able to work together and to hold most of those lessons as partners, and then we're able to really focus not only on that full first grade class, but as things pop up in those lessons, we're able to really dive in deep with kids and focus on how we can help them in the moment and support their social emotional skills at that moment in time.
And the results kind of speak for themselves. We found that just between our fall DESSA screening and our recent winter DESSA screening that there has been an increase in students' pro-social behaviors and skills. So we are seeing the results. So even if you're able to start small with one school or one grade level, you'll be able to take those results and very quickly show your stakeholders in your school or in your county and say, you know, this is necessary and it works.
So the last part we wanted to highlight today was the community engagement. So something really important to us, knowing the needs of our community and the struggles that we go through as a more rural community. If you don't know where Gloucester is, it's on the in Hampton Roads on the peninsula. We're very rural, about 30 minutes from Target, but it's just a wonderful community, very tight-knit, very welcoming. So when we realized these needs, we really came together as a community and created the Ready to Grow, Ready to Go initiative. So this is a task force that is focusing on supporting birth to kindergarten development. And it's so cool because there are members of every group in that committee. There are pediatricians, members of social services and the community services board. There are parents, directors of preschools, so Montessori, church preschools. Our homeless agency is involved. So they have a couple of different areas they work in. They did get a large grant, but that grant focuses on public-private partnerships, which is certainly important. But they also do broader work focusing on social-emotional skills, school readiness, and family engagement. So they're doing some awesome work that we're excited to see how that continues to progress as we go on. We also really wanted to focus on communicating more about DESSA results with parents. So we developed a letter that has some great definitions of what the DESSA is, the different social emotional competencies, and what we do is we send that home after every screening period, and it just lets parents know if their child is developing age-appropriate social emotional skills or if they could benefit from additional support, which is super easy because DESSA covers that for you. Aperture has a parent portal, so we link to that, and that has real applicable strategies that parents can use, as well as the strategies in the actual portal for staff members. They also have home links that you can use there. So the last slide we'll go on is just looking at a few resources. It certainly isn't exhaustive, it's just things we pull from. The first is the Center of on the Social and Emotional Foundations for Early Learning. This is an older website, but it's something if you're looking for some free, quick resources. It's got some good social stories, a great list of books if you're looking for social emotional books to tie into literacy. The second is something that I was really excited to see. It came in the Castle newsletter, The Practical Benefits of an SEL Program by Durlack and Mahoney. So it was just published in, I believe, December 2019. And if you're at the stage where you're still trying to get buy-in from your stakeholders, this is a great resource. It's almost like a research brief, and it has all the statistics, all the importance of having socially emotional learning in schools. Then certainly the Castle newsletter, as well as Aperture's newsletter. And the final link is what we use in our staffing meetings for social, emotional, and behavioral difficulties. So it kind of walks you through the problem-solving process and how we support our students.
So at this point, we're going to go ahead and put ourselves on mute, and Megan was going to tap in and let us know of any questions that you all might have.
Great, thanks guys. So if you are a listener and you have some questions for our panelists, go ahead and drop those questions in the Q&A box right now so that we can get a few of those answered before we have to jump off. So let's go ahead and see if there are any questions. I think one question that we had a little earlier in the presentation was if we go back to the what you guys were talking about with getting your teachers on board and your teachers not feeling like they were really a reliable rater of their students. Can you tell us a little bit more about that process? How long did it take, and what were some of the things that you were able to say to them to make them feel a little more comfortable?
So this is Megan, and yeah, that was a personal experience for me with some of our teachers. We did a lot of training on what the DESSA Mini is really asking, and the DESSA Mini, they encourage you to give the teachers the form ahead of time and let them look at what is going to be rated, and then sometimes even if you need to create a situation, if you're not really sure if a student works well with others, you haven't really seen that, you have the opportunity as a teacher then to create that situation and observe those behaviors. I had one teacher who was very uncomfortable doing it, so much so that, and it was a second grade teacher, that with the cooperation of the administrator, we had one of the resource teachers go through the DESSA the first time with her so that it was 2 teachers rating. I think one thing that's key for us to point out as well, with this year presenting the letter, sending the letter home to parents, we have had no negative feedback about the letter at all across the division. With our school counselors, if a student is in need, tend to reach out to the parents ahead of time anyway, just to say, hey, this is what we see at the school level, and just wanted you to know that we're here to support your child, and this is how we're going to do it. Is that?
And additionally, when I was reflecting back on that question, working directly with teachers, my administrator and I realized that a lot of the questions that are being asked in the screener on the DESSA are very similar to things that teachers are already reporting when report cards go home.
Right.
So it really isn't that much different.
Great. Another question that we have is more about the strategies. When do you implement the strategies during the day?
So that might depend on what building you're in. Like we were saying with Botetourt, they have factored in time component, I believe, in their master schedule. Whereas in our building, Carly and myself, our teachers are expected to have morning meetings, but when it happens, how it happens, as long as they're doing the process, it's very flexible. So it does, there's some autonomy in our district, whereas I've heard in others where there's a set time. And I think that's helped with the buy-in, though, because people can use, as long as they're using evidence-based strategies and they're doing things that will be effective and promote growth for students, we really allow some choice in it.
And the beauty is finding the downtime. So for example, if you're doing a check-in, check-out, that's first 5 minutes of the day, last 5 minutes of the day. If you're doing small groups, it could be lunch groups. It's really finding those downtimes, because I know a big barrier can be, we can't take away from academics, but you can find the time to do it. And majority of our teachers find, if not all, find that if you take the time at the beginning, you'll have more time at the back end.
Yes, we've heard that many times. We had another question about how you funded your program. I know you mentioned very briefly the VTSS grant funding. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Okay, go ahead.
Sure. So part of being a part of a VTSS cohort group, you do get a certain stipend. It's not guaranteed every year, but the first year it was absolutely guaranteed, and then from then on it's depending on budget. So we are very lucky in that our admin in our central office realized the importance of educating a whole child and making learning a joy to teach, or a joy to learn. So when we talk about our assistant superintendent, our superintendent, they're very much having a vision that kids are happy and excited to go to school and to learn. So they were very open, and they let us use some of that funding to support the DESSA endeavor. So that certainly, as we grow and mature and we have more schools wanting to join in from the upper levels, funding is an area we'll continue to do work in. But I am excited to see it. This isn't something that I don't think will fizzle out in any way. It's something that every year is growing, and more teachers are excited, more admin are excited. It's providing some tangible resources and some very real data on how students are improving. It's, one tool in our arsenal. It's a great tool, but really using that MTSS framework to promote social emotional strengths as well as academics.
Great. And then we had one last question about the CASEL alignment. So could you first tell us a little bit more about what CASEL is, because I think some people might not be familiar with the organization, and then why it was so important for you to find something that aligned with the CASEL competencies.
I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, we should have defined that at the beginning.
That's okay.
The CASEL framework is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And it's a framework that talks about basically competencies, interpersonal, and cognitive competencies. And so with DESSA, they have taken those five core competencies from CASEL and then expanded them a bit to include 8 different subscales. And so for us, it was key that it aligned with CASEL, because the research behind that is just phenomenal. And it's international in terms of what kind of competencies everyone needs in order to be successful and to grow. So when we found that DESSA was aligned with that, that was a key factor for us. Yes,
Other than if you search CASEL, CASEL on the Google, you'll come straight to their website, and it's just a plethora of information. There is that link in the one slide before this with the resources as well. And I mean, everything from what is social emotional learning to how do we track it, how do we teach it, So that's a really great place if you're just getting your feet wet. They even have like implementation guides. So like, what stage are you at in your district? Are you at the stage where you're ready to start doing this, or do you need to build in more of that buy-in? So they are, to me, the national/international leaders in social emotional learning.
And for me, with the DESSA, one of the things that they expanded on was that optimistic thinking. And we hear so much about the need for resiliency, especially going back to our early childhood students and trauma. We need to help teach kids resiliency. It can be taught. And so when DESSA looks at that and has strategies for implementation to help students grow in that, to me, that was really key.
That's great. Well, it looks like we don't have any other questions, but just as a follow-up, I know that you all mentioned very briefly that we do have another webinar tomorrow afternoon. This is going to be a grant funding webinar. It's going to be presented by Dr. Paula Love. She is a grant funding or an educational grant funding expert. So we're going to be speaking with her tomorrow afternoon. I'll make sure to include the link to register for that webinar in the email that goes out tomorrow morning. Again, if you can't make it, we'll make sure to send you a recording. So with that, we are all finished, and I am just more than thrilled to have had this conversation with you all this afternoon. It was very informative for me, and I can only imagine how everyone else felt. So thank you so much. And if you were a listener, look out for an email from me tomorrow morning. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.